I really didn't want to do this video. Fang, I know you're watching. Possibly. Your video, the separation of church and state from secular propaganda. You've made a few errors. Can I point them out, please? Right. Firstly, you opened the video with George Washington and Abraham Lincoln were devout Christians and founders of America. Lincoln was the one who freed the slaves 77 years after the founding of America. That's 87 years. He wasn't one of the founders. And he didn't go to any church. But that wasn't the beginning of the facepalm. That was a very, very common error amongst people who don't actually know any history. You say that the church is not allowed to interfere with the state. If the church is not allowed to interfere with the state, we end up with eugenics. Eugenics is where people are killed or sterilized because their genetic makeup is not adequate. Now, I don't know whether you know this, but there are a lot of secular states out there. I'm living in one now. And that's not happening. People who would normally, back in the day, have been left on the rocks near the cliff top or quietly smothered by their mother's pillow are living to a ripe old age. Look, even I am one of those people who would not have lived if it wasn't for medical science. And there are a lot of other people out there who, if not for modern science, would simply not be alive. And you start mentioning technology will only work when it goes to God's plan as defined by nature or God. And then you mention aeroplanes. That they work much better when they are all streamlined and that sort of thing. Following God's plan as described in Birds and Things. When the fuck did God invent a jet engine? Was Frank Whittle praying one day in Britain in the late 30s or early 40s? I can't remember. I only remember it was Frank Whittle, and then all of a sudden God put it in his head that if you push the thing through the spinny thing in the right way, then the plane will go much faster and much more efficiently. I'm not a rocket scientist, so I don't know the exact terms. And then going on, you say that the secular world bringing about the sciences was absolutely false. You say that the sciences were invented by the religious. Yes, that's true. You've got one point. They, all came from churches and monasteries, like, Newton, Copernicus, Linnaeus, Darwin. I mean, he was, he went to a divinity school. Except when their studies started competing with religion, it started contradicting religion, then the scientists stopped believing. And then you point out something called the modern myth of man's progress. You assert that times have gotten darker since people turned away from God. Darker since when? The 30s and 40s? I mean, there was a world war, and millions of people were getting killed in an industrialized manner. That's not happening right now, is it? It hasn't happened for nearly 70 years. And you say that this century has been the darkest time in world history. This is the 21st century. The Nazis were in the 20th century, and I know you were talking about the Nazis because you were showing pictures of Nazi parades. You say that the Nazis loved science and hated religion. Problem is that the churches were in on it. When Hitler survived bomb blasts, they were busy, they made some Te Deum masses and stuff to celebrate the fact that he survived the bomb blasts. And if you look at what they used to do, it wasn't pure science, was it? Most Nazi research was towards one of two ends, either making weapons or trying to prove their racist theories. And they often resorted to quackery such as phrenology, astrology, and that sort of thing. Look, starting with a desired result and then working towards that result is not the scientific method. It's something different to real science. Of course, the Nazis weren't scientists. They were gangsters in charge of a modern state. They bullied and lied and took control of Germany by force. I got swooped. They did not kill people for science. They did not torture people for science. They tortured people and killed people in order to be cruel and get rid of their enemies, because they were gangsters. That is the nature of being a gangster and being psychotic. For example, in some slave labour factories, what they used to do is, instead of using conveyor belts, they had people running up and down carrying bags of concrete. Now, this was far, far slower and far, far less efficient and caused more damage to the bags of concrete. But that's not the point. Their point was to try to kill people in the most torturous way possible. And that was the same goal as the experiments of Dr. Mengele. They were all there in order to kill people in the most torturous way possible. If you want a scientific worldview, look to the 20th century, today's 21st century. Europe or Japan, you know, they've shaken off their past and have far more science and far less murder. Have thrown off the shackles of the religion and have not declined. Secularism is not causing some moral decline. Why? Because we're still humans. We still want people to be nice to us, and we still want to be nice to other people. It's nothing to do with the decline of religion. I'm dangerously talented and I don't have a cool sign-off.